Well, me and Miss Diane are out here this morning, and I got a trailer here. It belongs to a buddy of mine. Got an excavation, or got an excavation, landscaping type business, and this is one of his work trailers. And I'm just gonna take some quick notes on it. Obviously that's not good. Something poked completely through that mesh. This is no good. He said the guys have had some kind of deal where they put blocks right here and put the ramp down to keep that from falling the rest of the way apart. Notice inside these fenders, this is touching the tire, and it's all come loose and kind of flapping in the breeze there, so that's no good. The other side inside the fender is not as bad as this side, but you see that little rust line where it wasn't painted. It's bent, so it needs a little this and that. That ain't supposed to be like that. And I see when I looked at this ramp, that's had a little excess weight on it there. There's been a little action there with that. Don't know what happened there, but that ain't supposed to be like that. And I noticed with his pin here in the front, I come out here and I was like, oh hell, his pin. You need these pins as a safety to keep those latched. But he's got it laying here because with this type of a hitch, when this is open, see, you can't put that back in there. And it bugs me to have a pin that's just laying there like that. So I think, you need a place to put that. And as long as everybody puts it back in the same place every time, it'll probably save you about 4 pins a year, because otherwise they get lost. But I don't see anything else major. Overall it's a nice trailer. I haven't jacked it up and felt the wheel bearings or anything, but we may take a look at this and that while we're at it. And like my buddy, he brought this to me. And he was saying, "Ah, man, I hate to bug you with my little shit." And yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. It's not a big, beautiful job where, everybody's real impressed with what you've done. It's never going to be like that when you're doing stuff like this. But you got to look at the good and everything. There's not much pressure with this job. It's kind of fun to think that, you can work on this thing, and hell, if I didn't get it done when he needed it, he'd just quit on it and he'd come get it and keep using it the best he could the way it is. It's not like it's something that, it has to be done a certain way at a certain time, and it's definitely not one of them jobs where it's like the first thing you got to do right off the bat is blow 20 grand on steel, just so you can work on something for a month and hope you get paid for it at the end. There's not a lot of risk in it like that. So, I don't mind doing stuff like this. I think, if you got a business like this, this kind of stuff is going to happen to your equipment, and you got to stay on top of it. You got to get these little doodads fixed, because otherwise you're going to run something like this to the point that it's just junk. I mean, this is a trailer. He probably really his business gets a lot of use out of something like this. And if you got to do a little work on it here and there, you got to do a little work on it here and there to keep it from having so much wrong with it that it's just an overwhelming amount of crap to fix, to the point that the trailer's not even worth it. So I'm gonna tear into this thing and we'll see how this goes, and we'll take a look later. All right. Let's get on it. I wouldn't really recommend piecing that back together like I did, you know, in a scenario, like in the ultimate scenario, obviously would be to cut that off and replace it. But we didn't get the piece of steel like this to put on here in time. I've got it here. It needs worked on, you know. That's what we can do right now, so that's what I did. The owner was concerned about, you know, they walk up this ramp, so one of those guys could have stepped on that and put their foot through it, you know, and hurt their leg on that. You can't have stuff like that. I mean, yeah, it'd been nice to have the piece here and replace the whole thing, but it's here and I'm fixing on it, and I've got to do something with it, and I think that's way better than it was. I thought I was done with the tailgate part or the ramp here, but I need to do something about that. All right, moving on. I don't actually know if it's okay to cover this up where it says West Virginia like I did with this flat bar here. But when I took that apart, that license plate is broke. It's tearing. It's been torn, obviously, from the gate banging down and it not being secure. So I'm going to leave it like this. They may need to do something different with that. And I guess this could be put down here, but then you're going to cover that up. So I don't know, but at least they've got some flat bars that are drilled to the right size to do that. I'm not messing with that anymore. Moving on. I got this year. This is a DeWalt DCF 913 3/8 drive. And what I got right here is the smallest 20 volt battery pack I've got. This is a 2 amp hour and it is not freshly charged. This has been in the shop for I don't know how long. I'm impressed as hell with this thing. These trailer tires, I would assume, are torqued to at least 80 or 100. You know, I used to always run and get an air line, you know, and deal with an air hose and you know, your half-inch drive air guns. They're like great big heavy things. This is one of the best things I've bought for the shop this year, I would say. I just wanted to mention that because I really like this thing. Got lights on it. It's a good purchase. Got that hammered out a lot better there. I want to talk real quick about repairing this where these insides of these fenders was just, you know, flopping loose in there. You can see right here where the tire was rubbing. That's really thin stuff right there. I'd say that's either 16 gauge or maybe less. But it's really thin. And it's been powder coated from the factory. It's been rusting. And we see this a lot where something's been powder coated. They don't clean the metal. They just put the powder coating over it. Factories do this because it can be done. That's the cheapest way to do it. And they take advantage of the stickiness of powder coating because it actually sticks to itself good enough that for the first few years something will look great. But you see what's happening with stuff like this kind of powder coating. The water's getting between the powder coating and the metal, and it's causing the metal to rust even worse probably than if it wasn't powder coated. But anyway, in a case with something like this where I've got to weld this really thin metal, it's dirty, it's rusty, you could use the MIG welder on it and try to clean it and get it really clean, because the MIG welder wants to weld stuff that's really clean. But the problem with really thin metal that's really dirty is, in a lot of cases, when you take a regular grinding wheel and grind it, you grind a lot of material away, and when something's really thin, you may have ground it in half. It's pretty easy to make a mistake with your grinder on 16 gauge or 18 gauge metal where you could grind right through it. So what I did, I used my inverter and I stick welded this. And a lot of guys, when you tell them that, would say, well, that's going to be really tough to stick weld because it's thin and you're going to burn through. Let me tell you what I did. On a situation like that, I used a 5P plus rod. This is a cellulose 6010, some people call it. 5P plus. This is a pipe rod. These rods they've been engineered to weld downhill on cross-country pipelines. I used those rods, and something you can do with those 5P plus rod is you can come over here to your stick machine and you can switch your polarity. Now normally most of the stick welding you do, your electrode is going to be the positive. And if you're welding with something like a 7018, you have to have that electrode positive. But with those 6010 or 5P plus rod, you can run the rods electrode negative. Now, the difference is when we have our cables and we're talking about polarity, we have generally the stinger that's holding the rod, your electrode holder being the positive, and then your ground clamp,
connected to your metal would be the negative. That's usually with DC welding the way it would be. And in that case, the positive side, or the rod, is the hotter side of the arc. The positive side is the hot. And that needs to be that way for most things. But if you're in a situation like this thin steel where getting good penetration's not the problem is burning clear through it. We actually want to be able to add weld metal without over penetrating. So if you think about that, you can see why, if I switch to electrode negative with a rod like 5P plus that will weld on electrode negative, now my rod is the cold side of the arc. So on really thin material, it's going to make it a lot easier for me to feed metal in there and get these cracks fused together and get this really thin stuff welded down. Now what I did, I went all the way around here with my 5P plus rod on electrode negative, and I made all my welds the first quick pass. And that's probably the only pass you would ever want to run on electrode negative. Once you've got things fused together, I went back to the machine. I switched it to electrode positive on exactly the same amperage. I was on 46 amps. Come back over here with the 332 5P plus and welded over those welds I just made. And that gave me a chance to re-solidify, where I had welded, burn out any remaining porosity, and kind of like cap it, weld a cap on everything. So that's what I've done here. I still need to do that to the other side. I was just going to do some quick notes on that. There's an advantage here where I could stick weld this, because the stick welding does really good going through this rust and dealing with this powder coat, and save me some time not having to get the metal as clean. I hit it with a power brush and zipped it up on electrode negative, go back to electrode positive, cap that off, and I'm really confident that this is gonna take care of this problem for quite a while. So moving on. Something I forgot to mention earlier on this ramp. Whenever manufacturers build something like this, where they haven't seal, see you have a square tube here, but they haven't seal welded it. They welded a couple places wherever, and they didn't weld this in. They left that unwelded, and they leave parts of the other side unwelded. On this, it wasn't welded across here or across here. You got to remember when you work on something like that, not to weld something like that completely shut, because water's going to get in up there. And when water gets in up there in the winter time, and you get some water in this tube and it freezes, it'll bust that tube. It doesn't matter how thick or how strong a tube is, ice freezing hard will break it. And what I did here is, for one thing, I made sure I didn't weld all the way around it. And after I put this on, just as a precaution, I ran a drill bit into right here to make sure that water could get out. When I build something new, brand new, with new tubing, I weld seal it completely closed, so there's no way that water could get in it in the first place. But when I work on something that was not built that way, I'm not going to go and try to seal this shut. Now that this has been powder coated and rusted, and I wouldn't trust putting the time in to get the value out of doing something like that at this point. So just wanted to mention that real quick, and I'm getting back to the other work. I took the wheels off of this side, fixed in behind here just like I did the other side, where that inner fender piece was flopping and rubbing the tire. That's all welded up and taken care of. Put the wheels back on.
I noticed this. This is a pretty nice gas can tray. But the way this is mounted, I noticed it's like that on both sides. That's annoying. I gotta do something about that. Just one more carriage bolt's all it takes. That's a lot more gooder. So that extra bolt makes them things more gooder. And this pin, I was noticing, like, when my buddy brought this, he left that pin like laying there. Because when these hitches are unhooked, that you can't put the pin back in the hole. You just drill you a hole like I did right here. You just leave that pin right there. You know, at least can't fall off there and get lost as easy. You know, you just put it back in the hole. That hole ain't gonna hurt nothing there. So that's pretty much it, I thought. But I saw this thing. That piece of wood, I'm not really against the piece of wood because the block is the right size to get this sitting there. I don't like that though. I'm gonna do something with it. So that'd get that to quit flopping around. So I'm done here. Miss Diane's coming in here meowing at me. She does that when she thinks it's time to quit, don't you? You think it's time to quit, don't you? I'm making too much noise and you want me to come in there and sit around. Well, we'll do that, but we got to get this trailer out of here and bring the truck back in and put all these tools away. And that's it for this deal. She done.